Welcome back, I'm Kim Bailey and this is Floral Art Review. We use our AI, DesignEye, each week to have a look at an old competition design of mine and analyse it in terms of the principles and elements of design on the basis on which we are judged in competition, and give us some insights into how it meets that criteria, and then some suggestions on what might be done to improve the design and bring it more in line with perhaps award-winning pieces. Although I will say, patting myself on the back, that a lot of these are winning designs anyway, but there's always room for improvement. There's always things that you could have done better. I know there's always things I could have done better. And often when I look at these designs as we go through, I'm a bit disappointed in the way that I've interpreted a class title or the placements of particular parts of designs that I didn't see at the time. So for me, it's a very much an educational journey as well as being able to share that education with you. This week, we're looking at a modern still life. Now, this is a defined design style. So for this competition, what it meant was that it would be a still life as we would have in any competition. But the difference between this and many other design standards is that the plant material doesn't have to dominate. Now, it's only this and an assemblage in this judging criteria where the plant material doesn't have to predominate in a design. So what I've struggled with in the past with still life is to make it look like an arrangement and not be too static. I do very much enjoy the still life paintings of the old masters, and so I thought the easiest way for me to ease myself into this design style and to start to understand it would be to use that as a framework. And so as you can see, what I've done is I've used a timber tray to hold the design as a base for the design, and it's got a timber breadboard with some bread, fresh bread on it. It's got a serviette underneath it, serviette wrapped around a wine cooler, which actually has an empty olive oil bottle in it because I didn't particularly want a wine bottle in there. Got some vine tomatoes still on the vine through a terracotta pot, and at the back there's a terracotta vase, but it's got some rosemary in it. And I've brought the rosemary down onto the cutting board as well. There is a knife in the bread to just give it a little bit more dynamism, a little bit more interest in terms of it making it look like it was a snapshot of something you might see on the table. So let's see what DesignEye has got to say about this design. I forgot to mention that this design actually did place first in this competition, and I was delighted with that because, as I said, still life is a design style that I'm exploring even after 20 years. There are things that I still don't get right, I still don't understand, I still can't translate from the definition into what it should be in terms of a floral art design. So with that, let's go and see what DesignEye has got to tell me and what I can do to improve the design. Firstly, the overall impression. This design successfully interprets the concept of a modern still life by blending natural materials with a rustic domestic tableau. Drawing from traditional still life compositions, yes, I got it right, bread, herbs, wine and produce, the piece creatively incorporates floral design principles within a food-themed framework, giving it warmth, earthiness and approachability. That's a nice overall reflection and feedback on this design. It is all of the things that I wanted it to be. As I look at it now, there are things that I can see that I would adjust slightly, but I'll wait and see what DesignEye has got to say about the individual principles and elements of design. Balance, first of all. The arrangement achieves asymmetrical balance with the height on the right, the bottle and the tomato cluster, countered by the visual weight of the bread and the rosemary bunch on the left. The tray itself helps frame the composition and provides grounding. And I think that's an important point, is that often in designs we talk about a base and we have a board that is a base. But this base and incorporating that base within the design, but this base, because I've used the tray and it comes up at the sides and it's obviously a tray, becomes part of the design as well as being the base for the bulk of the design that's inside it. Proportion and scale. The components are mostly well scaled to each other and to the wooden tray, giving a coherent sense of proportion. The knife handle and rosemary bouquet are slightly oversized compared to the bread, which creates a humorous, exaggerated focal element. This fits the modern twist. That wasn't something that I did deliberately. I'm amused by it now. My first thought when I look at it is that I've put the knife straight down into the bread, and it would have been, I think, more appropriate to bring it in at more diagonal an angle, because it would have brought the knife across further into the rest of the design. But we'll see what else DesignEye's got to say. Dominance and focal area. The bread and knife dominate the composition and immediately attract attention due to their size and upright gesture. The bottle and tomato grouping adds a strong secondary focus. However, the design could benefit from a more defined single focal area to guide the viewer's eye. I think that what I had hoped was that the tomatoes would be the draw card because of their colour and because of the grouping. And I can see, looking at it now, that I am drawn to the bread more so than I am to the tomatoes. So this is a very good review for me to remind myself to step back from a design and have a break from it and look at it again before the judging, so that it is reflecting what I think it is in my head. Because I believe that had I looked at this in that way before the judging, I would have perhaps cut the bread open so it wasn't such a bulk in that one side of it, or just had a few slices there rather than the whole of the loaf itself. Live and learn. Rhythm and movement. The viewer's eye moves naturally from the bread up through the knife and rosemary over to the tomatoes and the bottle. Trailing rosemary and fabric corners help extend the visual flow within the limits of the tray. The overlapping forms add gentle visual rhythm. That's very much, I think, a reflection of the paintings of still life, is that you often see the elements within that frame, that scene, that are overlapping so that they all appear as one, but you can see them individually as well. So I'm happy that I have transferred that into this particular design. Unity and harmony. Unity is strong, everything fits within a consistent theme, the rustic Mediterranean dining. Harmony in the colour palette, earth tones, reds and greens, reinforces the design's warmth and authenticity. And that was very much, the harmony of the colour palette was very much something that I was focused on, thinking again that the red would stand out and the rest would just blend together because they were within that colour palette of the earthy tones. The unity I'm happy with, because that's very much an important part of a modern still life, is that the individual elements stand out, but they are unified in terms of their interpretation of the theme. Line. Vertical and diagonal lines from the knife and rosemary create upward movement. The horizontal tray and arrangement of ingredients anchor the design. The line formed by the branch of rosemary pointing towards the wine bottle, olive oil bottle, subtly links the elements. Line, I guess, is something in this design that I don't see as obviously well interpreted as I would like. It's probably not as important because there are other things that unify the design. But as I said earlier, the line, the upright line that's created by the knife handle, I think I should have managed a little bit better and perhaps, as I said, brought it down a little bit more to the diagonal so that it was pointing from the bread across to where the bottle is. I've saved that in a sense by having some of that rosemary trail across that way, and by the placement of and even the lean of the bottle, leaning back towards the design, has helped maintain that unity within the design whilst obviously having the line. If you were to ask me, when I looked at it independently to say what was the line, I would say it's the horizontal, it's the tray, because that's the dominant line that I can see in the design. Colour. The red and white pattern fabric unifies the design and ties the colour scheme together. Red tomatoes, purple onion and green rosemary add natural vibrancy. The golden tones of the bread and cutting board enrich the warm palette. And I hesitated as I read that because I realised that, yes, I did put an onion in it. And I forgot to mention that all the way through. There is a red onion, a whole red onion behind where the tomatoes are. So it's not as obvious in this image, but it's one of those reddy purpley Spanish type onions, we call them here, that fits within the colour palette and is part of that overall Mediterranean theme that it seems to evoke from this design. So that was good that I got that reminder through this analysis. The colour palette, as I said earlier, was very important to me in terms of the interpretation, keeping it within those earthy tones, because I find that that's a comforting colour palette. And that's probably just me, but I just find it's easy to look at, it's easy to work in the blending of colours within that sort of palette. Texture, my favourite. Excellent texture contrast, crusty bread and poppy sesame seeds, smooth ceramic pot, glossy tomatoes, rough rosemary, rustic wood tray. These tactile elements add depth and realism, echoing the sensory richness of the classic still life paintings, which, as you know, is what I was looking for. And texture, if you've looked at any of the other videos, is the thing that I really like to focus on. I really like to know that there's a contrast of textures within a design. I just find that that gives me that artistic license to really make it a work of art rather than just a flower arrangement. And that's me. I think that everyone finds something within the principles and elements of design that is their focus. For many people, it's the line. So they will always do a design that has a very definite line somewhere in it. For me, it's texture. For some, it's colour. And that's something that you discover the more that you do your designs and the more comfortable you get with your own design style, is that you'll find where your focus lies within those principles and elements of design. Form. The composition overall is somewhat triangular, with strong upward gestures and radiating elements. Some forms, like the pot behind the bottle, overlap heavily, creating slight visual congestion. Sorry about that, I had a big cough in that break. The form of this composition is challenging for me because I think I focus so much on reflecting what I used to see in paintings of still life that I neglected to think about the form. And I guess that's a reflection too of the line. You know, I was a bit confused about the interpretation of the line, talking about the vertical lines, and looking at this, you know, if you tried to draw a triangle over it, I'd be hard pressed to make it a triangle, because I just feel like it presents to me as a rectangular form. So that would be something I would have to work on a little bit more. And I think it's to do with the height, because if you look at it, the height, the top height of the bottle and the top height of the rosemary on the other side are almost the same. So I need to make one or the other taller, and probably the rosemary needs to be taller just to enhance that triangular shape, which is more what I should be after rather than the block of the rectangle. Space. Space is used well within the tray dimensions. The arrangement avoids overcrowding, but a little more breathing room between the pot and the wine bottle would reduce visual compression. I was talking there about the little ceramic terracotta pot that's got the tomatoes in it, and having that spaced out a bit more. I wonder if I could have brought that a little bit more forward, and so I had the wine bottle really at the back of the tray, and then had the tomatoes and that pot a little bit more across the front of the the terracotta bottle pot and even brought it up to the edge of the cutting board, which is the next thing that's in front of it. Either that, I think putting it anywhere behind is going to make it very much less unified than it is now. So I need that overlapping part of it. Once again, something that I'd have to play with. Yes, I think it needs more space, but I think some of that is also due to the visual impression you get of it being that rectangle that I just talked about, rather than a more spacious triangle. So that's all of our principles and elements of design. Let's see what the suggestions are to make some improvements to the design. Clarify the focal point. Consider slightly adjusting the angle or placement of the rosemary bunch so the knife handle doesn't completely obscure the herb form or reduce the knife height slightly. So we've talked about that all the way through, is that, and I talked about it more in terms of line, but it's the changing that line at that angle of the knife handle is going to bring it down further into the design so that you can see the rosemary and the form of the rosemary a whole lot more, and that will create a different sort of focal area. I still do think that I needed to cut the bread, or have just a couple of, half the bread as the loaf and a couple of slices folded down might have changed the dynamic in that area of the design. Reduce visual overlap. The pot and wine bottle could be separated slightly or rotated to avoid flattening the composition and allow each item to breathe. So we just talked about that then, that bringing that ceramic pot in front of the wine holder, or having it somewhere on the other side of the design, not behind it, but in front of it, but still overlapping, to give some negative space between them, visually as well as actually, and as it says, to allow each item to breathe and to have its own space. Add subtle floral accent. While botanical elements are well represented, a single flower, for example a small daisy or a rosebud, could enhance the floral art aspect without straying from the still life theme. Yeah. I'm not enthused by it, as you can tell. I guess what is going through my mind is what sort of a flower, a single flower, is going to be part of this story that I'm telling with this still life. Now, if we talk Mediterranean, I could probably put a rose in, but I feel like it would be out of place. It would be a little bit too formal for the rustic feel that I've got there in the design. So I'd have to really think about what single flower is going to work in the story that I'm telling with this design. I'd consider it, but it wouldn't be my first way of improving the design. Use light more deliberately. Consider how lighting affects the shadows and surfaces. Some enhanced highlights on the tomatoes or bottles would increase depth. This is probably not appropriate in terms of this particular design, but it is something that we need to think about when we're staging a design. So when you're benching the design, you think about where the lighting is. How is the judge going to see your design? Not does it look right to you, but when the judge walks along the bench and looks at the designs, are they going to see shadows where you would rather not have them, or are they going to see shadows where you would like to have them? So think about physically how you put your design on the staging itself. So whether it's the bench or it's a plinth or it's hanging, whatever else it is, think about where the installed lighting is coming from, because often, particularly in this country, we have venues where they're not made for floral art. So the lights come from all different places, and I know there's a particular one we go to where the lighting is just dreadful. And so you have to think about that, because the judge is not going to come in and say, oh, the lighting's bad, so I'll give them all extra points. The judge is going to come in and judge on what is presented in front of them. So the more they can see, or the more you angle a design so it takes advantage of the lighting within the venue, the better off you'll be in terms of an end result. It's just something more to think about. So there we have our design for this week, the modern still life. let's see what the overall impression is of this design. This is a charming, thoughtful design that stays true to the spirit of still life while offering a tactile, modern interpretation. It successfully integrates botanical material with culinary props, evokes a sense of place and taste, and communicates a narrative. With just a few tweaks for clarity and spatial refinement, it could reach a more polished level. And I think that's probably a very fair overall assessment. As you can see, as we've come through looking at the individual elements and principles of design, it does tell a story. It could tell the story a little bit better. And so that's what we're looking for in terms of that clarity and spatial refinement. And I think that and often that's the case with designs, just one or two minor changes, an angle of something, as with this one, the angle of the knife handle, the slight adjustment of the placement of where the tomatoes are would make such a difference to how you are visually impressed by this design. So certainly, and it's good with still life because there's not a whole lot of structural elements or plant material in them. It is one that you can mix and match and change around and take the photos and do the comparison and see where the improvements lie. So that's, it's good practice. It's good to get the feedback and then to go and practice it again. So with that, I will leave you for this week. I encourage you to take advantage of the fact that on the website you can have your own designs analysed. You get the reports back within about 24 hours. A human judge will look at them as well, just to make sure that it will make sense to you in terms of your floral art journey. But for now, I'm Kim Bailey and this is Floral Art Review.